What's up, everybody? This is Adam from AdMind Analytics, and you're listening to the AdMind Analytics podcast. More people than ever are trying to tie all their marketing data together in a way that helps them actually move the needle for performance. Why do I say actually? Well, because more often than not, tech tools are overpromised, marketing teams are understaffed, and the data just keeps pouring in, which all lead to marketing analytics data that's just not quite helpful enough. On this show, our founder and I discuss all things marketing analytics to help you navigate those complicated waters so you can measure the impact of your marketing and use that data to push your business to the next level. All right, welcome back to another episode of the AdMind Analytics podcast. My name is Adam Collins. I am the Director of Sales and Marketing over here. And with me, as always, Mike Query, our founding engineer. It's late in the spring season when we're recording this, and Mike was able to get in some skiing today, as I understand. A brief description on how it went for you, Mike?
It was not May 8th in the mountains, but it was definitely May 8th down here. But it was like, if you had hit me in the head and said, what day is it? I would have been like, January 15th. And it was crazy. Tons of fresh, pretty snow.
Awesome. Well, cool. All right. Well, today what we wanted to talk about are, from the marketing side, we're talking about assets that you can use to better your market position by adding good value, by creating things that people want, by addressing some of those things, and just giving in an effort to become an authority in your space and to kind of establish a goodwill relationship. And, a lot of people struggle historically with like, well, how much of that do we give away for free versus should we be collecting people's emails or charging them for this? I know I personally run into a lot of issues where people were like, that's our core information. We need to charge $1 million for that. And it's like, I bet you could give everybody every single word of this and it wouldn't make a difference for the people who want you to implement that for them versus people who would take what you're giving. Anyway, so assets are a great way to do that. And specifically, one of the things we're going to talk about today is an audit asset that AdMind has been working hard on for the last several months. Namely around GA4. We're going to get into some of those details. I'm going to start with Mike. Give me some of your thoughts on why you felt like this was an important thing to do and why you feel like this adds value for people that are struggling with GA4 stuff.
Yeah, well, a couple things. Like, the point of an analytics program is to generate insights. Its goal is to teach you things that you don't know that you can act on to improve performance. And so anything that you have to do that distracts you from that goal, that isn't actually producing insights, is stuff that's like, you want to get it done as fast and as ruthlessly and with as minimal effort as possible. You just want those things to go away. Like cookie compliance stuff, like do that as fast as you can because it doesn't teach you anything. You got to do it sometimes, but do it and get it done. Data cleaning is that same sort of a thing. Like collecting the data and getting the data collected accurately is like, accurate data is not the end of an analytics effort. An insight, something that you can act on, is. So getting the data clean, like let's get through that stuff immediately so we can get on to the important things, which is like learning about the customer, learning about our messaging, learning about the performance of our teammates or our vendors, and improving those things. So let's get the data cleaned up. And we've spent historically too much time in data clean world and not enough time in teach us and learn world.
Yeah. So let's go in. If we kind of double click into the data cleaning world, one of the analogies that I've used when we talk about this just internally here is sort of the eating your vegetables component of marketing analysis work, where you're seeing that there's discrepancies in the data between what Google reports and what other system reports and all these other things. And you end up as a friend in the marketing seat, you're now trying to learn what sort of attribution models are these different platforms using and why would they be different in these different ways. And it introduces like all these tasks and time to try and figure that stuff out. And any second that you're spending in there is a second that you're not spending on improving your messaging or getting your message in front of your target audience. Is that sort of that I'm kind of painting with some broad brushes there, but is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. If you were to take inventory of the mid-market, like anything under Fortune 300 or something, that mid-market space, and go, how often are you executing tests? Whether it's tests on your website experience tests, like, or if simpler tests, like testing ad copy or testing landing page copy or testing pricing or something like that, like smaller, simpler to implement sort of tests. If you ask people, how often are you doing that in the mid-market? The answer is 1 out of 20 is testing with enough regularity to generate learnings. You need to test. You need to be executing tests and getting learnings back on a weekly basis, at least, in order to generate enough insights to actually improve the messaging to your customers and to inform what your product development looks like or what your service offering is to make it mesh with customers' needs better. And the vast majority of the mid-market is mired in data problems or trying to report, spending more time putting together reports and up the chain that present the data, but don't present learnings. And that has to change. We have to get to learnings and not just data.
And so tell me a little bit about what the goal is if we're trying to speed up the vegetable eating process. Talk to me about how what we're working on is facilitating that.
So over the course of, we've been doing this analytics thing for just a little over 10 years. And there's some really, really common ways that data collection gets screwed up. People that are working on implementing the data collection, but just haven't implemented an analytics system like start to end from the beginning before. And so they make mistakes that are totally understandable if it's your first or second time doing it. So we've cataloged those things. We probably have 100 that range from things like you're using UTM parameters on your internal links, which for an analytics system means when somebody clicks on a link in navigation or something, we reassign that person's or that visitor's attribution. That's bad. We want their original attribution, what we did in marketing to lead to them, not what they clicked on. There's a better way for us to track what they clicked on. So there's one example. Here's another one. In e-commerce, it's super, super common for people in analytics system, Google Analytics says, give us a product ID or a product name. When somebody views a product detail page, if that product's configurable and has a size or a color or a quantity that you can adjust there, a bundle, it's super common for that ID, the ID of a product at the detail page, to change or to become more specific when somebody adds that product to cart. If you're trying to track how often people are seeing detail pages and then adding those products to their cart, but you're not recording the same name or the same ID at detail page and cart time, then you can't calculate the conversion rate from detail page to cart. Super easy to understand why that data collection would be implemented that way, but it causes a reporting issue. And so that's like, there are hundreds of those sort of things that go wrong. And that's why most people's data is just a dumpster fire of ugly stuff, is because there's a lot of tracking problems. So we've cataloged all those and we check as many as you possibly can programmatically. And then if we can't check them programmatically, we give you instructions to check them manually. So we can say, let's get through getting the clean data stuff so we can get to the learning stuff. That's the point of the analytics effort.
So what is it if we were to Google search, GA4 Google Analytics Audit, and we were to kind of test out some existing products that are out there, it sounds to me like what we would find is is GA4 deploy, like is the tag found on different pages, or is it configured out of the box? Like, and I'm kind of pontificating from the marketing side. Like if I Google GA4 Audit Tool, I'm expecting I'm going to get some sort of like, yes, you have GA4 and it's working. But that's a huge gap.
Or if you pay people to look at that stuff, there's largely what happens, either a tool, and it's most commonly it's people that do this stuff. There's a couple tools out there that are really lightweight, that do just a teeny little bit of glance at the stuff and kind of give you a little sense. Most of the offerings are people that do it, and people that are operating from some sort of a checklist, like we check to see if you're e-commerce, we check to see if you have transactions, we check to see if you have add to carts. And a lot of time what they're doing is they're reading, those checklists are generated from reading the Google Docs, which say how you can collect any data that Google Analytics will collect. They're just saying, are those things implemented? Like, is that in place? Is that in place? Is that in place? That's kind of crazy because not everybody needs everything implemented. Dumb example is if you're not selling things and you don't need e-commerce data tracking, if you do e-commerce and you only have 10 or 15 products, then you can't, you don't have enough products to optimize product listing experiences. There's not enough data there for you to decide to take product number 15 and put it in number 12 slot and have that make any meaningful impact on your performance. Product list tracking is totally useless to you. It's time that you would spend collecting data that you can't ever gain an insight from. So a lot of times what you get out there is like the checklist of like, is the code in place? Are the events tracking? And a little bit more often you'll get some more meaningful things like, do you have a filter in place that filters out your development traffic? And it's like, yeah, maybe. Well, for most people, that's so far less than 1% that it's not the most meaningful thing. It's not why their analytics isn't working to produce insights. It's because they've got 1 out of every 100,000 visitors that's a developer that's doing some testing. Like, those aren't the things that make analytics not useful. So that's kind of the flavor of what you get when you search, give me a Google Analytics audit, are those sort of things.
Yes. Okay. So out in the, if my pain point is I need GA4 audit, then let's go one step back and say,
Okay.
paint for me the picture of what are some of the symptoms I'm experiencing that would lead me to want a GA4 audit. Like, we're just in the world that we're in. We've just gone through a 2-year period of like Google saying GA4 is coming and okay, GA4 is here and now we're going to stop collecting data. And now we're in this world where you're either using GA4 in some capacity or you have some other tool. But if you're not using GA4, your stuff is broken essentially. Like you're using GA4 now. And so what would be some of
you mean if you weren't using, like, if you were planning on using universal analytics, like there's other analytics tools available
for sure.
But yeah.
Yes.
But if you're on free analytics, then you're using GA4 now and you're dealing with a system that's been newly implemented and, honest truth, is far less efficient from a user experience perspective at generating things that you want to know about performance. Like, way worse.
Let's paint the picture of like, what are some of the pain that people would be experiencing with GA4 where they would say to themselves, have I not even deployed this right? Like, is there something wrong? Do I need an audit here? What is the friction that they're experiencing that is pushing them into this place of thinking maybe someone else needs to confirm whether or not GA4 was done right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, there's a laundry list of things. So if you don't have conversions tracking and you can't see the primary activity that you want people to complete when they visit you, that's problematic. That can be for a number of different reasons. Either you haven't set them up in the GA4 interface, or when you moved the universal analytics tags to GA4, you made a mistake in migrating the tags. So that's a big area, like can't track primary activities. Things like you go to look at a report you're used to looking at and you start to see a bunch of undefined or not set values or unassigned. So you're looking at a channels report and you go, what is all the unassigned traffic? Why do we have 70% of our revenue associated with unassigned? When you go to look at a landing pages report and you go, the first one on the whole list is not set. Like, what is going on? What does that even mean? Does it mean I'm missing or screwed up data collection someplace? So those are some of the things that you'd see is like just stuff that doesn't look right in the data, particularly that doesn't match your historical experience.
And so if I wanted, again, we're going to circle back to like potential. So I'm going like, oh my gosh, I've got tracking that's not happening and channels that aren't attributing the right way and landing page stuff is not set and that's not helpful and et cetera of other things. And now I'm going Google Analytics for audits. And currently with what's out there, what are those typical offerings going to do for me relative to these problems that I'm having?
Well, a lot of those offerings will tell you some about the problems, and a lot of them, the goal is to list out the problems so that they can sell the longer term implementation. And we're in that same category, but just the job of listing out the problems, some of the things that are easy solves are not the ways that we create unique value in the world. So we want to just like give you the list of the things that are broken and the things that you can solve them quickly. There's a ton of opportunity to generate insights and learning from the data. And that's what we're really interested in, is generating insights and learning. And so if we can get past make sure that you have the referral exclusion list set up for your payment processor stuff, that's like a couple button clicks and then watch the data for a day or two and make sure that it's looking okay. If we can get that stuff done rapidly, then we can get to the job that's the important job, which is the learning job.
Okay, so from the marketing seat, I'm not interested in analytics for the sake of like sleeping at night that my data is accurate. I'm doing it so that I can find the insights that's going to help me move the business forward.
And it keeps you up at night if it is inaccurate, because you know you're prevented from doing that job.
Right.
Accuracy isn't the end if you go, oh, it's accurate.
Yeah.
Like,
the point is not on an island to have accurate data. That doesn't do anything for you. It's what you do with that. So if what you're saying is we're trying to get to a place of the accurate data as quickly as possible. And when I'm using that broad brush of accurate data to mean you've got GA4 implemented in a way that's useful for your business. And you're confident that the data that's coming in is tracking what you want and attributing things the way you want and that sort of thing. But what we find is that when we engage with clients to do that, that process of going from dumpster fire of data collection and that kind of stuff to a place where we feel like, okay, now things are accurate, we're saying that takes a long time, too long. Too much effort is going into that relative to finding insights. And so maybe just give people a picture of like, on average for, a typical client, how long does it take to go from dumpster fire to, okay, data's accurate. We're not necessarily getting the insights, but now I can sleep at night that the data is accurate and my world is okay.
Yeah, this varies widely, and a lot of it depends on the sophistication and efficiency of the dev teams, because a lot of times fixing some of the data collection, particularly I'm thinking about e-commerce stuff, like getting add to carts tracking or something. When you have 3 or 4 different ways on your website somebody can add something to the cart, that the amount of time that takes depends on the communication between what the requirements are and to the engineering teams that implement those sort of tracking items, and then the successful delivery of that tracking information. So some teams, it takes a couple of weeks. You're 2 or 3 weeks in and you've made a lot of progress. Sometimes it takes much longer than that. In organizations where there's heavy overhead and not a whole lot of like communication, the marketing team doesn't have much power to talk to the dev team and ask for requests, that can slow things down. And then when we see other vendors come in, sometimes other vendors will pitch year-long plans to get data collection in place. Like, we'll do a giant plan of all the things you could ever potentially track, and then we'll work on implementing those things for 6 months before we give you any new data. And it's like, whoa, if you're optimizing for insights, 6 months till you learn anything new, and $100,000 of investment is a long time to go out on a limb before you actually learn something.
So describe for us then, so AdMind has built this audit tool that is free for people to use. And describe for me where this tool fits in from quick teams that can do things in a couple of weeks to year-long efforts to get to this spot where the data is accurate. How is this audit tool going to help marketing teams in this space of, I'm not sure my data is accurate and I don't even know what to do about it, even if you told me why or where it wasn't accurate?
Well, rather than 2 or 3 weeks for a human to go review and catalog the list, and hopefully that human knows all of the ways that the data can get inaccurately collected. When we see folks that come from other analytics, have other analytics efforts that have taken place, most of the time there's still a junk pile of bad data that just is not well tested, not well thought through, not well collected. So taking 2 or 3 weeks to find out what those things are and hoping that that's comprehensive, just then to turn around a plan. Like what we're focused on doing is taking that 2 or 3 week period and cutting that down to like 5 minutes. Like, there's so much of it that we can know. And then there's some things that we can't know by just looking at the data. We can't know what the best way is to categorize visitors into visitor journeys, because we don't know the marketing theory when we look at the data without a human involved in it. With the computer can't say we don't know what the computer can't say we don't know, or we know what the intention is of the marketer. But what we can say is there's definitely some things that are wrong with the data. And so the idea is rapidly find out what the things are that are wrong with the data, then strategically plan. Then you can engage a human and strategically plan what things should be in the data that are not in the data, and how you take the data that's collected and turn it into useful, deeply insightful reporting experiences. That's where a human can come in, but we want to cut down that 2 to 3 week period and the cost and the cost barrier of to involve a human to do that. We want to cut that down to like done, instantaneous.
So we're talking about like if you had a human who knew all of the places where the data lives and could be wrong, and all the ways that it could be wrong, from UTM configuration, like, I mean, that's what we're talking about, like the list of things that could be wrong, you'd have to know comprehensively what that list is to then even engage a human to go through and check your GA4 against all those things that could be wrong, to then come back to you and present, here are all the things that have gone wrong, just to then get to a spot where you could talk about what needs to be fixed before you're getting to a place where you're actually confident that the data is fixed and talking about the results. That process taking weeks, assuming you have the right people and process in place to even do it, we're bringing that down to minutes. And
Yeah,
so,
and definitely there's some of the things that you find that are like, oh, this is a no-brainer. We can fix this now. That's great. We want to provide you the capability to not draw that out. If you have an urgent need and there's something urgently wrong and we can identify that thing, let's get that fixed before we even start to talk about how to improve the analytics world. Like, let's knock off the low-hanging fruit like now. Let's get that done now.
yeah, so walk me through kind of how the tool does this. So we're going from weeks down to minutes. So walk me through it.
Well, what we do is we get access to the analytics account. You authenticate with Google and we get access to the analytics account. And we ask a few questions like, do you do e-commerce? Are you in higher education? Do you do B2B lead gen or services lead gen? Things that would tell us what things are in all of those scenarios should be in the data, things that we should expect to be in the data, and
So
things that
wait,
maybe we should expect not
yeah,
to be in the data.
I want you to go into that a little bit more, because it's important for people to understand why we ask that question, I think.
Okay.
And so, like, what would be different between somebody who runs the free audit tool who does B2B lead gen versus somebody who does e-commerce?
Yeah. So in the e-commerce scenario, you care a lot about Google's specific e-commerce metrics. And I think I mentioned this just a few minutes ago, that like depending on how many SKUs you have and what your e-commerce experience is, some of those data points are more important to you than others. If you're Amazon, then you care a lot about what list experiences are like. If you are, somebody who sells 3 different types of baseball hat, then your list experience doesn't matter. So a little bit of information helps us prioritize what the findings are. And then for the e-commerce folks, we definitely want to be looking for the e-commerce type metrics. Product data needs to be there. Revenue data needs to be there. Product IDs need to be set all over the place. You have to have those things consistent between the shopping steps. B2B lead gen has none of that. B2B lead gen has a lot of information, like you should have conversion actions around leads. Your shopping behavior, if you're B2B lead gen, is about content consumption. You're trying to use your content to drive people closer to becoming a lead and talking to sales. So those are the things that you'd want to make sure you have present in your analytics data collection. Is you want to make sure you're tracking leads. You want to make sure that you have content categorized. You want to make sure that you have, particularly if you are a B2B lead gen or B2B where you can purchase a product on the site, you want to be thinking about separating the in-product experience from the original conversion of trial or demo or sign up for an account experience. So those are some segmentations you'd expect to see in the data. So yeah, those are different. If you're higher ed, then you're thinking a lot about like the conversion actions being apply or start an application or request for more information. And so you'd expect those things to be present in the data.
So those questions are designed to ensure that the results are more prioritized towards the goals that business is going to have based on.
Yep.
This goes back to, there's 1,000 settings that you can configure in GA4 and look at, and it's not a matter of track everything. That's actually absurd. You should track the things that matter to your business.
Yeah.
So we're asking you those questions so that we can help prioritize tracking the things that matter to that type of business, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so next step. Sorry, I cut you off. So next thing.
Yeah, so we authenticate with Google. We ask you a couple questions about what your specific advertising or marketing circumstance is, and then we comb through the data with computer, with a machine over the API, and we look for all of those specific issues. We run about 100 tests. There's a bunch of those things that most people pass, but every once in a while you find somebody who's done some crazy thing, like set an attribution model that makes absolutely no sense ever, and sometimes that happens. So we check all of those sort of things, and we're adding to this list all the time. Every time we find something that's new that we haven't thought of before, we add in more testing. And some of these things change. You may pass today, and then in 3 weeks, when you've done some implementation, you've made a change, and now you've lost some data quality, and you should be checking again. So if it turns out that you work with us in an ongoing basis, then we'll run the audit for you on a regular basis and tell you if any of those data quality markers change. So we use the API to go pull through all of the data and check for those things. If we find that there's errors, then we generate a result, and we show you where the specific errors are. And then we have a little bit of a video that says, here's the most common way these errors get into the data and the things that you might be wanting to think about in order to fix those issues, the people you might want to talk to, and the systems that are probably responsible.
So tell me a little bit more about, so I've authenticated, I've asked my questions, I click a button, it runs the audit, and the results that I'm going to be looking at. There's going to be people who are running this who are super IT focused, that are running it from like the analytics engineering background perspective, but you also might have a CMO who's running it, or like people on the marketing team who are not as familiar with all the different configuration kinds of things. So we've talked about it, checks for, all these different things. Am I getting a list of all these different things? Yes, no, pass, fail. Are they grouped in some way? Do I get some grade on these things? Like, walk me
Yeah,
through that
all of that. Yeah, what
all of
we
it.
give you is a list of all the areas where you're passing or failing, what we were looking for, what we consider to be passing. Like an example is a common problem that people have in e-commerce tracking is sending duplicate transactions. One of the most common ways this happens is like customer comes in, checks out, sees order confirmation page, and we render the code to send data to Google and other systems at that time for what the transaction is. You send the customer a confirmation email and say, thanks for your purchase. If you want to see your receipt, click this link. And then you use the same page, the order confirmation page, to show that receipt. And when they come back and click on that link in the email at some time, you render another transaction and send the data to the analytics account again. Now you have a duplicate transaction. You're double counting revenue. You're double counting conversion values, or
And
conversion counts.
a lot of
And
time
so,
people, like, I'm thinking about my own e-commerce experiences, and I feel like a lot of time it's the track my package, track my order
oh yeah,
thing.
that sort of thing, like that
So
check
you
in
get
on
the
your
email,
order
it's like,
stuff.
yeah, check my order
Yep.
status, and I click on it, and
Yep.
now I'm seeing the last page that I saw as I
Yeah.
transacted originally.
Yep. Super common mistake. And so we check for things, every individual thing like that. Like, do you have duplicate transaction IDs, or do you have transactions that are the same transaction from the same user but on different days? That means you probably have a problem. And so we'll say there's one result, and we'll give you the scenarios where that happens, and then here's another result. We check for, do you have payment processors in your traffic sources? Are you showing that you get traffic from PayPal.com? That is unlikely for 99.9% of the internet that PayPal is sending you links. It's more likely that people are getting associated with PayPal when they go through the checkout process and get redirected back to your domain. That's stealing their original attribution and screwing up your reporting. So we look for stuff like that. So there's all those sort of things, and we categorize each one as a pass or a fail. And you usually don't care about the passing ones. You usually go, great. Like, I want to know the broken things. So we highlight those and give you a grade in a few areas. And we break out the grades into the areas based on how it affects your reporting. So there's a bad and missing data section where you have either poor data collection or you're missing things that you should have. There's an attribution section that are like errors that show up as problems that give you poor channels or poor attribution of marketing effort to conversion. There's a section that's like ease of use, because there's a bunch of things that are not necessarily wrong, but when you collect them, they make the data really, really hard to use. Common example is like, you have your homepage that loads under admindanalytics.com and admindanalytics.com/. Those two things show the same page, but you record different pages. So when somebody goes, hey, how many home pages did we view? And you have to add up 10 rows, that's a problem. That means you're probably not giving the right answer when you're asked, or if you are, you're not doing it. It's cumbersome to do. So there's an ease of use section that describes a bunch of the common ways that the data gets collected that makes it really hard to use. Then there's a system integration section that talks about what systems you have connections to. So do you have a connection to Google Ads? Is it set up appropriately? Do you have Google Search Console? Is it set up appropriately? Do you have a connection to BigQuery? Is it set up appropriately? And gives you a sense for whether you have the appropriate systems integrated. And then there are some things there that we can't test for, but that we definitely know should be integrated. And we give you a list of those things. So we can't check this, but you should check A, B, C, and D.
Do you have some thought? Yeah. What's an example of one of those?
Yeah. So an example of one of those things is like, if you're doing lead gen and you have a CRM system where you're feeding a sales team and that sales team is talking to leads that you generate and trying to qualify them, you almost certainly have this discussion in your organization. We're generating a ton of leads, so you guys should be good in sales, right? And sales going, all those leads stink. None of them are very qualified. We can't talk to any of them. So optimizing your marketing efforts for qualified leads is a difficult thing to do, and it's a difficult thing to measure, especially if you can't see the idea of a qualified lead in your data. If you can only see filled out form, then you don't know whether those are good form fill outs or bots or qualified leads. And sales is telling you none of them are qualified. It's all a bunch of people looking for office cleaning or whatever, something. Yeah. So one of the things that should be integrated is your web analytics should be integrated with your CRM system so that you can build reporting that says, here's where we spend dollars, here's how many leads we get, here's how many qualified leads we get, here's how many opportunities we get, here's how many sales close one we get, here's our lifetime value, here's our payback period. Should be able to see that string all the way through from web visit to revenue generated and payback periods on your cost per acquisition. So There's one example of system integration that we can't test for in the API, but should be in place.
So let's do a little comparison here real quick. So we're testing for all these different things, and every time we think of something new to test for, we add it to this list. Let's snap our fingers and assume that we can clone a person who knows all of these things that we test for, that knows everything that's in the list, and we set them to work auditing an existing analytics account for those things. How many hours do you think it would take a competent cloned analytics engineer who does know all the things they're looking for to find and give these answers back to a brand?
It's probably 2 working days if the goal is to catalog them and then also provide the examples of where there are failings in the data collection. It probably takes 2 working days to do that.
And so if we assume, if I bust out my calculator here, if we assume that, I don't know, let's just
call it 20 hours for easy math.
Yeah. So 20 hours at like most engineering development kind of hourly rates. There's going to be a range
between
there.
150 and 250. Call it $200 an hour.
Well, let's be generous. We're going to be generous here in our first calculation. So you're going to be 3,000. So 20 hours at $150 an hour is $3,000. At $200 an hour, it's $4,000.
Yeah.
You're in that $3,000 to $4,000 range of paying someone to go in and look for these things. And we're saying this tool is going to do all of that for you in a matter of minutes, and we're going to do it for you at no cost. And the reason for that is ...
Because everything that we care about is what comes after. What we care about is learning and creating data to human experiences that result in insights. Human looks at data, sees something they don't know that they can act on to improve performance. Things like change budget in campaign, block that keyword, change the copy on this landing page, change the price, think about a test. Maybe we want to run a price test. Those are the things that turn into revenue and turn into learnings for organizations, turn into better products for the world. Better data collection is just the unfortunate thing we have to do to get there. We're in the business of getting there, and getting the data collected accurately is like let's get that done and be on with it.
So what are some things that you expect? So I'm asking you in your heart of hearts, what are some of the things that you think is going to happen? Someone reviews, they go through this audit process, they're looking at their results. What are some things you think are going to happen? We give 100 people, 100 people do that. What are some activities that you think happen to those 100 people after they see their audit results?
Well, I think we know some of these. Most of the time, there's more dirtiness than you expect. So a lot of times it's like, oh, there's that much stuff. Now, we do a pretty good job with the tooling of trying to categorize and prioritize those things. You do probably need a human at that point to say, great, we have the results. The doctors told you that you have high blood pressure and you're pre-diabetic and you might be a little overweight and your fingernails are long. And it's like, okay, well, which of those do I really need to tackle now? What's the most important thing? And an expert will be able to say, it's super important to recognize that you have high blood pressure, but what that means you actually need to do to get results really quickly is like, we need to get you on daily exercise, whatever that is. Like that we'll be able to do that and say, there's a couple of these things in here, like the long fingernails are like, that's cool. Deal with that later. You can live with long fingernails for a long time. So I think people are going to be surprised at how much stuff we do find, and also be potentially prone to need some seasoned help in tackling the things that are the most meaningful, that produce insights the most quickly.
And what we're not doing here is we're not saying like, oh, we found X number of things, now pay us so that you can see what those things are. We're saying, here are all the things. And on the other end of that, people are going to go, what you're saying is they're going to go, man, this is a lot of stuff. They're also probably likely to look at some of these things and go, I can deal with that. I kind of know or knew that was an issue, or we're working on that. We got that. And then there's going to be a group of things that they're going to say, we don't know how to deal with these things. We don't know how to fix these things. And so what you had said earlier is there's going to be some videos that are accompanying these results that'll say, hey, this is what's wrong. We're going to now talk to you about why it's likely going wrong and what the fix would be, which means that we're sort of enabling some additional DIY, some additional things to be able to say like, hey, these are some low-hanging fruit, if you will. And some of these things you'll be able to go in and tackle on your own. But there's going to be a group of those things that people are going to need some help with. Am I generally speaking, do we anticipate that's kind of what the experience is going to be?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. There are some things too, like we're pretty opinionated in some of the things that we think, some of the benchmarks that we've seen over the years. One of the things that we'll see, and I've already seen this experience play out a few times, but one of the things that's common for us to see is we think that you shouldn't have more than X amount of direct traffic. That number shouldn't be larger than 20% of your overall traffic. There's a bunch of people who are going to hear that and go, yeah, but we sell products. And so like a digital product. So people come to our site all the time to log in. So we have way more than that direct traffic, because most of our visitors come directly. They bookmark our site and come directly to log in. I would say, great, except those aren't marketing prospects. And so if you're showing them in a marketing report and you're trying to isolate what marketing is working and not working, those are product prospects. And so you're grouping two groups together that are muddying up your capability to describe what your marketing prospects, what you're trying to do to get people to start to trial the product. You'll see the same thing in higher ed where people go, oh, tons of times people come in just to log into the student account or just to see their course list or whatever. And I say, fine. Except that those people shouldn't be in a marketing report because they're preventing you from seeing what your marketing prospects are doing and cataloging their data. So if you got 1,500 marketing prospects, but you have 15,000 people who are coming to log, how do you know what's working? You're seeing all that 15,000 people's worth of data as they go to log in. Oh, our homepage drives everything that ever happens. Like, maybe not for those 1,500, it doesn't. Maybe those 15,000, it does. You need to be able to extract those things. So there's some of those scenarios like where we're going to be opinionated, but much of the reason for those opinions is because of what we've learned over the years of trying to make data speak and turn into actual insights. Some of those benchmarks are based on what it takes to arrange that, and not just to turn GA4 on, because GA4 is turned on and collecting the data. That benchmark tells you something about what you can see in the data that's accurately being collected. It's just not accurately being categorized.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that stuff will happen.
So I'm going to ask you so on the scale of strongly disagree, neutral, strongly agree, right? On that scale, we could run this audit for people, and we could put enough time and energy into it that it explicitly even tells people exactly what to do to fix every single possible issue that's in there. And there'd still be people in there that say, that's all great, I don't want to do this myself. I am marketing team of X amount of people, and for us to get one of our dev resources in to do this stuff is just, you just know it's not going to happen. So on your scale, strongly agree, disagree, there will be people that we could do this all the way for, and it just won't matter. They'll still want the service of someone else coming in and doing this.
I think some of the solves are for some of the problems. Let me list another problem as an example for the question you're asking. Some of them are kind of technical. One of the ways that data collection gets screwed up, that's not a Google Analytics problem. It shows up in the data, but is if you have redirect schemes that don't work. One of the most common ones is when somebody goes to visit your site, when you type into the browser, when you go, I haven't been to this website before, I haven't been to mikestshirts.com. So I go to mikestshirts.com. Your browser tries to load HTTP, the unsecure version of mikestshirts.com. Your website, mikestshirts.com, definitely implements the security protocol, the SSL certificate. So when that request comes in, you redirect that request to the secure version of the site. When you type it into the browser is going to give it the natural unsecure version. You redirect. When you do that, if you strip query string parameters on that redirect, so if you say, okay, anything that comes into HTTP, let's just redirect it to HTTPS, but you forget in your server configuration file to keep any existing query string parameters and bring those forward with the redirect. If you forget that, then you have things that happen like you send an email, the email link is inadvertently to the insecure version of the site. It gets redirected. Now it lands on HTTPS, but no query string parameters that show that it came from email. So it shows up as direct traffic. Fixing that problem is a little technical. You have to know where those redirects are defined. And sometimes that means you have to be able to get into server configuration files and make changes for those sort of specific situations. So some marketing teams will hear that and go, great, I get it. I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure even who I'm supposed to talk to. If I'm supposed to talk to somebody, I don't know how to explain it particularly well. And if it's done correctly, I don't even know how to check that it's actually done correctly. So we can get to the situation where we describe every single thing that needs to be done, but without actually going and doing it, it might be difficult for some of those teams to make some of the adjustments that are required.
Yeah. And I'm tying it back to like marketing goodwill and saying, like, as a business, when you're trying to like generate goodwill in a space, there's a risk. I think about like previous iterations of my work at different companies where it was, we don't want to say those kinds of things, or we don't want to do that stuff. That's what we charge for. And it's like, you could tell everybody every single detail of what you do and all day long, and you're not inventing a time machine for people to do this on their own and
Right.
without giving up their own time to do this. You
it's
can
like
do
a general
all of that.
Contractor saying like, hey, okay, so Adam, here's how you're going to build your house. First thing you do is you're going to rent a backhoe. You're going to dig a big old ditch. Then you're going to pour a foundation. Then on top of that foundation, you're going to build some walls. But before you build those walls, you got to go to Home Depot. You got to buy a bunch of wood. You're going to square up those walls because you don't want unsquare walls. You're going to double check to make sure that your house isn't sinking before you do any of that work. And you're going like, okay,
that's
great.
a low blow, Mike.
Sorry, I couldn't help it. But it still doesn't create the world where you have a crew of people to work for 9 months to do that.
Right. Yeah. And so I look at this and like, we're going to end by sort of answering the question, why do something like this? From the marketing seat, the why around why you do this is, one, it's awesome. It is so awesome to provide something that used to take thousands of dollars and weeks of time to be able to provide that in like comparatively like seconds. I mean, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, a minute or two to be able to provide that information is just such a cool thing to be able to do. From the marketing as it relates to like the go-to-market strategy of a brand, there's not a risk of somebody all of a sudden taking that as the secret sauce and then coming up with AdMind ripoff, and all of a sudden we're out of business because we allowed this audit tool to be free. That's such like myopic thinking around the value that you bring to the market, when the reality is so many people out there, we could give them the exact blueprint of how to do this, and it's not, there's still the value of having someone else do this stuff for you who does this work all day long. Because even if you gave me that blueprint, I'm not going to be able to address challenges that I experience in the field of building my house. While I'm out there and all of a sudden we encounter some hiccup, I'm not going to know how to do any of that. And so from the marketing why around why we do this, is this kind of stuff is awesome. It's just good to put that value out there and to give people a head start where things used to cost time and effort and all this other thing, to be able to jumpstart that and get them into a place where we're talking about now solutions. There is no risk of people being like, great, yoink, now I'm off on my own. Like, there's still going to be a place for the consultative services that we offer, and we do way more good in the world by putting out this stuff than we would by charging for it.
You know, Blockbuster used to have conversations that I'm sure happened that I didn't see in person, where they were like, you know, we're pretty good at figuring out how to get these videos shipped to our individual locations, but man, there's so much value in all those people that help check people out when they buy those videos. And somebody in one of those conversations somewhere was like, hey, don't you think we could put it in a box and just let people swipe their credit card and get that video out and take it to their house? And Blockbuster's like, no, that's not the value. The value is that people experience. We can hand them that nice, warm, freshly rewound VHS tape and send them off on their way and tell them to enjoy Edward
this romantic
Scissorhands
comedy. Yeah.
And that, you know where that went. So the point is, the information that you hold in your mind is not as special as you think it is. What's really, really powerful is the execution of the value delivery. So
right
there it's.
So tell me, so I'm going to ask you the same question. So from your perspective, you know, I kind of went off on my soapbox because I'm excited about this. I think it's going to be a cool thing for people to use. But from your perspective in your seat and being the engineer who's tackled so many of these problems in the weeds, what for you is the why behind, why would we do something like this? Why would we spend the hundreds of hours we've spent in building this? Why?
Reasons. One, because the fun doesn't come from cleaning the data. The fun comes from learning from the data. That's what's really enjoyable about analytics, is when you go, oh, I get now why they're doing what they're doing. I know how to fix that. That means more revenue. That means more growth. That means better people, happier customers. That's the fun part. The second reason is some of these things are kind of hard to keep track of over time. Like, just because it's working today doesn't mean that it's working tomorrow or in 3 weeks. You're going to be, especially if you're testing more frequently, that means you should be making changes, which means you're going to increase the risk of breaking things. But what you should be doing is making changes. So if you want to encourage more active change making, you're also going to increase the risk of more data collection problems, because more parts in motion. So what you need is something that you can run regularly that tells you, oh, by the way, something we just deployed caused default or duplicate transactions, or something we just deployed caused some of those pages come in without the variables that we know need to exist when the page gets recorded. So part of it is also to support the fun work, which is the testing and the learning work. You have to be able to QA the data more regularly and make sure that you keep data clean.
All right. Well, we're super excited to release this. We hope that you take some time to go and check out the audit, join the accounts, get the results. Let us know what you think. We're excited that it's out there and excited that you're able to see it, benefit from it. We hope that we get your feedback and let us know how it goes.
We should put a bounty out. We should put a bounty out. If you can think of a test that we're testing that shows bad data that we haven't thought about, we should offer something. Jimmy John's,
just right on
or
the
something
fly,
better.
huh?
Yeah, okay. Something much better.
All right. Well, the challenge is out there, so we'll compensate when we find it.
Okay.
Cool.